You have already had one or more really disappointing birth experiences, and you don't want to go through that again, but you want more kids. You're thinking to yourself, I really want to have another baby. I really want to do this again. I want to do this over. I want to get it right this time. But all of the information that I followed the last time, everything that I thought I was doing right, turns out to be the wrong things. Well, guess what? The reason is because the way that birth is being taught is setting you up to fail. And the reason why your birth plan failed the last time isn't because your body is broken. It's not your fault. The reason that your birth plan failed is not because you had to lower your expectations. It's not that you couldn't cope with labor. It's not that you couldn't handle it. And it's not anything to do with whether or not you could actually have birthed your baby. The reality is that oftentimes what happens is that moms who have had one or more traumatic experiences, they've been induced or they had multiple cesareans, they go on and they have beautiful home births. They have unassisted births inside the hospital. They take their power back and they prove that actually their bodies worked fine. So if you're currently thinking, I had a C-section and I don't know if I'm going to be able to birth this baby vaginally, and I don't even know if I should try to get pregnant again because I'm just going to get pushed into another C-section, this is for you. If your last baby, you were induced, or maybe you were induced multiple times, multiple different pregnancies, and you're thinking, I hate induction. I really don't want to do that, but my body doesn't seem to work. I don't go into labor on my own. This is for you. If maybe you had one or two experiences in the hospital, maybe you didn't have an induction, maybe you didn't have a C-section, but you really hated those vaginal exams and you really hated when they put the Pitocin in because they wanted to speed up your labor, or they broke your waters, or it was just really stressful. And you're like, I don't want that experience this time. I want to have a home birth. I want to be able to take my power back. This is for you. This is called getting the birth you want the second time or the next time. It's based off of the chapter, Get the Birth You Want, the second time, inside of my book, Your Empowered Birth, which, by the way, Your Empowered Birth is now available on my website. You can go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/book and get the copy. So this book basically gives the whole overview of my powerful system, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. But the idea came to me because when I was pregnant with my first baby, I did all the things I thought I was supposed to. And a lot of my friends did all of the things that they thought they were supposed to. And in fact, my friend Jenny, she had her baby inside the hospital. It was a non-VBAC supportive community. And not only that, but this was an unassisted birth with her, basically her doula and her partner caught the baby. And she also caught her own baby. So the three of them caught the baby together. And the nurse was standing on the sidelines and not knowing what to do. So basically the idea is you go into your birth, you think you're doing all the things right. You find out that you didn't get the birth you actually wanted. Maybe it was more painful than you thought it was going to be. And it was because you couldn't cope. Maybe it was that you had interventions happening to you that you didn't want. Maybe it was that you gave your power away. Maybe you had said at the beginning, I'm not going to have any vaginal exams. But then when you got to the hospital and the nurse kept pushing the vaginal exams, you gave in. Or maybe you had said to your doctor, don't cut me. And then they gave you an episiotomy. Or maybe you said, I'm not going to have a C-section. And then guess what? You got pushed into a C-section. Or I'm not going to induce. Guess what? You got pushed into it being induced. And you want to know why? What happened? What is it that led to you getting this birth that you hadn't wanted? Well, this is a story that I've seen over the last 10 years, and it happens over and over again. Here's how it usually starts. You go in with a certain idea of what you want. You then think at the beginning of your pregnancy, I'm going to read all of the things. I'm going to go to all of the birth classes. I'm going to read all of the books. I'm going to go to all of the blogs. I'm going to follow all of the influencers. I'm going to read like all of the articles that I need to. I'm going to watch all of the videos. I'm going to go on the YouTube channels. I'm going to go on to TikTok. I'm going to go on to Instagram. And I'm just going to consume birth for the next 9 months. And that will protect me. And maybe if you understand a little bit in those videos, or maybe you've followed a whole bunch of natural birth influencers. I mean, they're all out there. And they say you don't want to have an OB, you want to have a midwife. So you think, okay, cool. I need to go find a midwife. Here's the problem with that. Midwives aren't always available. So then what happens is that you're trying to find a midwife to support you, but there aren't any, or maybe it's not accessible, or maybe you don't have the money. Here in Canada, midwives are registered. So we have a system, basically it's covered by our medical. And in a lot of other countries, it's the same. But in the US, you're usually paying out of pocket. Usually your insurances won't pay for a midwife. Although there's a loophole for that. So if you ever want to know anything about the loopholes that I have found by being in the network of birth workers for the last 10 years, just send me a message at carly@empoweringmomsbirth.com and we'll figure out where you're at. And I might be able to tap into someone who knows someone else who can get you a midwife in your area or get your insurance to pay for your home birth. Because there are always ways. There's loopholes to everything. And that's something that the system does not want you to know. So you go and hire a midwife. Maybe you're lucky. You go and hire a midwife. The next step is your midwife then tells you that as long as you're low risk and you continue to stay low risk, you can stay with them. But here's the problem with that. See, you go in thinking as long as everything's fine, I can have this birth that I want. And they say, yeah, you can totally have a home birth as long as everything is fine. Eventually what happens is you fall into one of those natural birth traps. If you want to know which one it is, you can just go and get my guide, empoweringmomsbirth.com/shop. All of the information is there. The 20 traps guide will tell you about these natural birth traps, but there's so many. But the idea is this. There's a gatekeeping going on when you're trying to get what you want. The midwives have a certain amount of restrictions. It's just the way things are. They have their limitations depending on where they practice, depending on who is basically watching over them. So they will say, if you are over a certain body mass index, you can't be here. If you've had one or more C-sections, we can't support you with a home birth. If you go past your due date, we can't support you anymore with a home birth. We have to induce you and put you in the hospital, and we have to transfer care after 42 weeks. They might say your baby's not growing big enough. Like your baby is too small. This is what happened to me. I was told my baby was too small at 35 weeks. Or they could say the other one, your baby is too big. Maybe you developed gestational diabetes. Well, now they're going to say you can't have a home birth. Although there are people who have had home births with gestational diabetes. Or maybe you had chronic high blood pressure and the midwife's like, sorry, I can't take you on as a client anymore because you have high blood pressure. So you have to now transfer to an OB. Or maybe it's something else. The idea is, though, is that you can have a home birth if you can have a natural birth, if you can have a midwife, if it's Cinderella. Cinderella, you can go to the ball if you get all your work done. And we're going to give you impossible tasks like sorting lentils from the ashes that we've tossed it into the fireplace. And if you can pick up all of these lentils and finish your chores on time, then you can go to the ball with us. Good luck. Well, you don't have little birds to come in and sort through those lentils. It's not magical like that. However, what you do have is something that Cinderella did not, which was the knowledge that actually you didn't have to do any of that stuff at all. You don't have to meet other people's expectations in order to get the birth that you want. You just need to hire somebody else. So like Cinderella should have just walked out and said, you know what, peace out, stepmother, I'm leaving. The fact is, you can take one look at the midwife who's telling you that you can't have what you want, and you can fire them. And how to hire your care provider, of course, will help you, but so will your empowered birth system. So Your Empowered Birth is a book that helps you understand how to find the right care provider. It helps you in recognizing any red flags. It also helps you in recognizing what you want so you can be more powerful to get it. Now, say you've managed to get the right care provider. They are supporting you in what you want. But now we have another problem. You've been told that because you're too far away from a hospital, you can't have a home birth. You have to go to the hospital. There's another gatekeeping right there by telling you that because you live in a certain area, you can't birth at home. Well, first of all, let's look at that for a minute. If you went into spontaneous labor and the baby was coming now, what would happen? You'd birth at home, right? Or you'd birth on the front step of your porch, or you would birth on your way to the car. There's been babies that have been born in driveways. There's been babies that have been born in carports. There've been babies that have been born in underground parking lots as they've left the high rise that they lived in, and they could not make it. Even breech babies. There's babies been born in taxis. Why do you think that happens? Because you're traveling to the hospital, but baby is coming now. If you had just stayed home, you wouldn't have had that car birth. You wouldn't have had that taxi birth. You wouldn't have had that sensationalized story of birthing your baby on the side of the road or at a gas station, because you would have been home, where your body is actually designed to be for birth, because that's the safest place for you, because it's the most familiar. Now, I'm not saying that you can't go to the hospital, but what I am saying is that if you're choosing a hospital birth, you really need to be careful, because even if your midwife believes in you, and my midwife did believe in me, the one that actually attended the birth of my son, she believed in physiological birth. She knew I could do it, and she knew I could do it without intervention. The problem is that the hospital that she had the privileges at was not supportive of physiological birth. So I got lucky with her because she happened to be 2 years away from retirement. And because of that, she was able to do things that the other midwives within that same system, within the same health authority, they could not do what she did. They would not have been able to hold off on vaginal exams. They would have had to push it more. They would have had to say, after I was pushing for an hour, you know what, this isn't working, and you're at your time limit, and we have to transfer the care to the OB, and the OB is going to call the C-section. But because she was of a certain seniority, and she's like, if they fire me for this or reprimand me, like, I'll just retire early. She was able to fight for me and keep the OBs outside my room, so they couldn't come in and pressure me into the C-section that they really wanted to do. There were 3 obstetricians outside my room, and they were waiting for me to give up on pushing for 3 hours so that they could say, you know what, this isn't working. You got to have a C-section, because that's what they were used to. So when you go into the environment that you are unfamiliar with, you don't realize that even if you've hired a really good midwife who says, absolutely, I support you in this, or even if you hire a doctor who absolutely believes in physiological birth, because they're out there too, the hospital environment that they're in can skew what their normal practice would be if you stayed home. So it's not the same thing. If they will practice different in a birth center, they will practice different in the hospital, and they will practice different at home. Because in the hospital, they're being watched. In the birth center, there are restrictions too, because there's insurance issues. It's all bureaucracy. So Say you've chosen the home birth environment. You've chosen the midwife. You have read all the things. Now, here's another one. Your partner's scared. Your partner and your family and your friends are saying, it's your first baby. Or, you already had a C-section. You already had an induction. Things already didn't go well for you. I'm really not comfortable with your idea of having a home birth. You really shouldn't do that. You really should be in the hospital. And then maybe your partner will be getting from their side of the family, talk some sense into your partner right now. Talk some sense into your wife. Talk some sense into your girlfriend, because what she's doing is dangerous and it's going to put your baby at risk. They are hearing things. You're hearing things. And it's all affecting in here. It's all affecting your mind. So then what happens is that you're no longer in your power. You're no longer thinking decisions through from a place of power. You're thinking in those fear. Wait, what if they're right? What if my baby is too small? What if they don't tolerate labor well? What if I do end up with a uterine rupture? What if I do need a C-section? What if my pelvis is too small to birth this baby? What if my baby really is 11 pounds? Oh God, what if I bleed out? What if my baby is in danger? What if we can't get to the hospital in time because something happens and it's just in that moment and we have no support? What if that emergency situation does happen? What if I can't do it? What if my body really doesn't work? What if I really am too old? What if I'm just not capable of this and I'm going to end up needing medical help? And if I keep fighting with everybody and telling them that I know everything better than them, what if I'm wrong? Well, guess what? All of that fear, all of that doubt, that holds you back. It's the same thing with anything. For example, I used the same system when it came to leaving my toxic relationship with my partner, because I had those same fears coming up of, well, he's abusive, but what if I can change him? What if he's not actually as bad as my family say? What if I'm wrong? What if I never find another person to love me and support me? What if I break up the family and it turns out that I'm the problem because everyone says I'm the problem? And over, you keep thinking these things. Or when you're afraid to start a business, this is the same thing. It was like, what if what I'm talking about isn't actually important? What if nobody cares? Now, I just attended an event for the baby show in Vancouver. And I can tell you, and you already know this because you've been following me, that what I'm saying, you understand, it's important to you. You wouldn't be watching this if it wasn't important to you. But what if I'd stayed stuck in my fear? What if I continued to say that what I was teaching wasn't important and I never got out there and I never told you these things? What if you had never found me because I stayed stuck in my fear? Well, the same thing is with your birth. What if you can do it? What if you can have the most amazing empowered birth of your life? What if you can have a vaginal birth after 2 cesareans at home, unassisted, with your partner catching your baby, and never have to be poked or prodded or have anybody massage your uterus or run Pitocin or tell you that you need to have a C-section because you can't birth now because you've had 2 C-sections? What if you could actually do it? What if you could birth your baby at home unassisted with your partner catching? Or what if you could have a midwife? What if you could have that beautiful birth that you're envisioning, the one that everyone says is impossible? What if you're of a certain size and people keep fat shaming you and they say you can't do it because you're too fat? But what if instead of that, instead of believing that, what if you decided to birth your baby your way anyway. You chose not to induce. You didn't end up getting gestational diabetes, or even if you did, you could still birth your baby naturally. What if, even if you've had 2 C-sections or 3 C-sections, what if you could prove to everyone around you that actually your body works? It always worked. You were just a 42-week mama. It was nothing wrong with you. Your body does actually go into labor and you can push your baby out of your own vagina. What if, even if you had high blood pressure, even if you'd had a traumatic induction that had turned into a cesarean, even if you had had gestational diabetes, even if you were 41 years old, what if you could end up having the most empowering, beautiful birth inside of a hospital with just your doula and your partner and you catching the baby, and nobody touched you, nobody poked you with any needles, nobody said that you couldn't do it, and you just birthed. You experienced birth. What if you could do that? Well, guess what? You can. Now, that was the thing that really got this for me, is recognizing that not only could I birth my baby without any interventions, even though I was told I was so tiny and that my baby was not growing properly, and that even if he was growing properly, that I'd probably not be able to handle the pain. And because I was such a small person, that maybe my baby would get stuck. Maybe I wouldn't be able to do it because I was pushing for 3 hours. So obviously I'd need an episiotomy or a C-section because my baby was not coming out, right? No, I got that baby out. My trauma from that birth doesn't stem from what happened to me personally. It doesn't stem from the fact that I was pushing for 3 hours. It doesn't stem from any pain. There was hardly any pain. I was actually able to handle it very well. And my contractions were apparently 2 minutes on top of each other. Like she said, my midwife, she said to me that I've had transition-like contractions the whole labor that I was at the hospital. And it's not true, because my transition is actually like 2 minutes. And then it's done. So that's my hardest part. And even then I could handle it. So the fear that my family had put on me is like, Carly, you hate needles. What makes you think you're going to be able to have a baby? Carly, you're such a wimp when it comes to your period. What makes you think you're going to be able to have a baby? Carly, you can't handle pain. What makes you think you're going to be able to have a baby? And then I did it. I did it without an epidural. I did it without any drugs other than taking the gas. And the reason I took the gas wasn't for the pain. It was because I needed to escape the environment I was in. I got high on the gas to escape the fact that I was in a tiny bathtub inside of a hospital with a nurse hovering over me the whole time, waiting for the moment that she could get the next vaginal exam, which never came, because I was just like, no, I'm not doing it. So I had those doubts and fears come up of, what if I can't do this? While I was pushing my son out, I was thinking, what if I can't do this? What if I end up in a C-section? And I closed my eyes for a minute. And then I thought, no, I'm not giving them the satisfaction. I'm not giving them the satisfaction of me going for a C-section. I'm just not doing it. And so I pushed that baby out. My trauma doesn't stem from anything to do with my labor. My trauma stems from the fact that at certain points, I had been so afraid, and knowing without a shadow of a doubt that if I had done one thing, if I'd made one mistake in that moment, if I'd given up my power in that one moment and actually given in to those fears, I would have a C-section. If I hadn't hired the midwife that I'd hired, I would have had a C-section. If I hadn't known about physiological birth, I would have had a C-section. If I hadn't hired a midwife at all and gone with the standard OB practice, you better believe I would have been induced and had a C-section. If I hadn't been the stubborn person that I was, knowing how to ask the right questions and get really critical with how I was thinking about things that people were telling me, I would have had a C-section. And that is where my trauma stems from. And for a lot of people, it stems from how they were treated. It stems from losing that power. And so your empowered birth helps you take your power back. It helps you take your power back before you even have a traumatic birth. So this is for you if you have never given birth yet, if you're currently pregnant or you're planning to get pregnant, and this is your first baby, this book is for you. But even more important, this book is for you if you've already had multiple births. Because oftentimes we think as moms, hey, I've already done this before. I already know what to expect, but now I have different questions. And a lot of the childbirth education is geared towards you when you first got pregnant. And then they tell you, don't bother taking a childbirth class if you've already had a baby. You already know what to expect. So it's probably just going to be the same way. So you don't think about that. You don't think about taking childbirth classes when you've already had one or more births until the point, maybe it was with your second, or maybe it's with your third. And you're like, man, what the hell? Like, I didn't know anything as a first-time mom. I'll accept that. But I thought I knew what to do the second time. And then I got screwed over again. So how do I make this different? How do I make this different? And that's where your empowered birth, get the birth you want the second time, is the most powerful chapter for you. And this chapter before that, get the birth you want the first time, will help you see where the traps are. I obviously can't get into everything in this book, but it's induction season right now. So right now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing bits and pieces of this book from now until the end of this year. So we're going to make 2023 the year of empowered birth. And the thing is, if you want that book, all you have to do is go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/book, and you'll be able to get the whole thing. You'll be able to get the entire empowered birth system. You'll understand what you need to do in order to plan your birth with power, get past your fear, and get the birth you want without having to fight, beg, or compromise. All right, so in the next few videos, for the next few classes, I'm going to be teaching you components of this book. And you're going to be able to get a deeper dive on the information that you need. But again, the best bet is to go and get this book because it also contains exercises that you're going to want to do. So this isn't like any of the typical books on childbirth. This one helps you learn how to think, not just what to think, because that's where a lot of books get it wrong. They tell you, don't induce unless you need to. They warn you about the cascade of interventions. They warn you about the bait and switch. They warn you about how natural birth can go wrong. One of the best books for telling you all the things that can go wrong is What to Expect When You're Expecting. That book is just everything that could possibly go wrong. Here's this book. Now you can go and read it and then ask your doctor how to avoid all of these bad things. Unfortunately, your doctor is more likely to push you in the direction of getting a C-section, getting an induction. Don't worry your pretty little head over it. We'll take care of everything. If you've already had more than one baby, you already know what that leads to. You don't want that. You want to take your power back. So this book actually helps you take your power back. In fact, one of the things I had back when I was pregnant with my daughter, in the very first trimester, I was standing outside doing the Improving Birth Rally for 2015. And I had this sign. So I put this sign out and I held it up at the rally and it said, for this birth, I'm taking my power back. No permission needed. And so for this birth, you're going to take your power back. No permission needed. That's what get the birth you want without having to fight, beg, or compromise means. It means you are in charge. You are the decision maker. You're the one that decides whether you induce or whether you find a different route. You decide even if you get gestational diabetes, how you're going to handle that. You don't let somebody else decide how you're going to handle it. You take the control back. You decide. And you get the right education for it, and you can seek out the resources, and you don't even have to bombard yourself with all of the things. All you have to do is ask the right questions. All you have to do is follow the system that's in your empowered birth, and you will get the birth you want without having to fight, beg, or compromise, and you will be able to take your power back, no permission needed. All right, that's all I have for you today. Again, if you want that book, go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/book. I'll see you soon. Bye.